I'm Shomo Data, and this is Built to Trust. Today's episode is about a simple idea that took me years to learn. Clarity beats intensity. Early in my career, I believed momentum cured most things. If we moved fast enough, if we showed urgency, if we stacked more effort on the problem, it would crack. And sometimes that works. Adrenaline can carry you over a short hill, but on anything that matters, effort without alignment just creates heat. You get motion, not progress. You get heroic weeks followed by quiet disappointment. You get smart people trying hard in different directions. The longer I've led, the more I've learned that the bottleneck isn't energy, it's precision. When the work is crisp, when the problem is defined, the owner is known, the path is sketched, and the success criteria are visible, teams move quickly almost by accident. When it isn't, intensity becomes a mood, not a tool, and people burn out while feeling strangely underused. So, what does clarity actually mean in practice? If you strip away the buzzwords, clarity is four promises made explicit. First, the promise to define reality: what is happening, what isn't, and what matters about that difference. Second, the promise to name ownership: who holds the pencil, who has veto power, and who is being consulted or simply informed. Third, the promise to pick a finish line: when will we decide we did the thing? How will we measure it? And where will we look to see it? Fourth, the promise to show the path between here and there: the first milestone, the review gates, and the constraints that shape the design space. If those promises are not visible, everyone writes their own version in their head. Misalignment isn't malice, it's physics. People fill the vacuum. Let's start with the first promise: defining reality. A clear problem statement doesn't include the solution, it paints the boundary and the consequence. Battery pack combust faults increased 4 times in the last 2 builds, causing ground aborts and delaying test by 3 days per week is a problem statement. We should refactor the can stack is a guess, maybe a good one, but still a guess. A strong problem statement has context, constraint, and consequence. What changed? What limits bind us? What is the cost of doing nothing? When leaders jump straight to solutions, they often optimize for the wrong failure. I've done that. I once pushed a team to redesign a harness because intermittent faults looked like a physical connection issue. What we discovered later was a fault injection behavior in our test stand firmware that flapped a line under rare timing conditions. We almost shipped a heavier harness and never would have fixed the real cause. A better opening would have been: we're seeing intermittent bus faults under test conditions A and B. They are not reproducible in field logs. The cost is 3 lost test days per week. Our constraints are schedule and weight. Our hypothesis set includes physical connection, firmware timing, and EMI coupling. Here's how we'll discriminate among them. That statement invites the right science instead of declaring a winner. The second promise is naming ownership. One of the most powerful words in a high-functioning team is owner, not in the legal sense, but in the sense of who has the last clear responsibility to integrate the work and call the trade. In a world that praises collaboration, and I value collaboration deeply, we sometimes become allergic to singular ownership because it feels authoritarian. The opposite is true. Singular ownership creates psychological safety because it removes the secret contest over who is supposed to decide. I like to make the ownership map explicit with a simple model: DACI, driver, approver, consulted, informed. The driver holds the pencil and the schedule. The approver has the authority to accept risk or redirect scope. The consulted are subject matter experts whose input shapes the options. The informed need to know but do not vote. In a small team, D and A might be the same person. In a regulated environment, A might sit in systems or safety. What matters most is that the map exists, is written, and is understood before the work heats up. The third promise is picking a finish line. Clarity requires a measurable end state. I've found that the most frictionless teams anchor their work in language like done when X is true, measured by Y, observed in Z. For software, that might be Done when the service handles 10,000 requests per second at P99 latency under 150 milliseconds, measured in synthetic load test and shadow traffic, observed in dashboard ABC with alert threshold DEF for flight test. It could be done when the aircraft executes 5 consecutive hovers at nominal thrust with no faults on the power bus, measured by telemetry channels X and Y, observed in the post flight report and the test conductor sign off. The reason to be this pedantic isn't to satisfy process, it's to prevent endless loops. Ambiguous done is an invisible tax. It drives people back into argument because they can't close the loop with evidence. The fourth promises to show the path. I don't mean a 50-page plan. I mean the very next few steps and the review gates where we'll inspect learning. When the path is invisible, people make up their own sequence or they wait. I like a 3 milestone view: M1 to reduce uncertainty, M2 to integrate and prove viability, M3 to lock scope for delivery. M1 is not about perfection, it's about de risking the riskiest assumption. M2 is where you discover all the inconvenient interfaces. M3 is where you stop bargaining with reality and commit to the ship date with eyes open. Sometimes all three happen in a week. Sometimes M1 takes a month and saves you 6. What matters is that the team knows which hill they're on and why that hill comes first. To make these promises real, I use a 1 page brief. I call it CLEAR: context, levers, end state, accountability, runway. Context is the problem statement and the consequence of doing nothing. Levers are the controllable variables we can pull: scope, schedule, specification, spend, staffing. Identify which ones are flexible and which are fixed. End state is the done when statement and the metrics that go with it. Accountability is the DACI map plus the exact cadence of updates. Weekly check, midpoint review, final review. Runway is the time box for M1, M2, M3, and the constraints that shape how we move. Regulatory considerations, safety limits, customer commitments. If you can't write clear on 1 page, the work is either too big or too muddy. If it is too big, split it. If it is too muddy, you are not ready to start. Let me offer a concrete example. Imagine you're shipping a telemetry pipeline for a new vehicle test. A vague brief might say, stand up the pipeline by next month so we can analyze test data. A clear brief would say, context, current CSV export, and manual upload delay analysis by 2 days. We need sub-hour visibility to manage test risk. Levers, schedule is fixed for first use by September 15th. Scope can be limited to 5 core channels. Spec for alerts can be manual in V1. Staffing is 1 backend, 1 data engineer. End state: done when 5 core channels stream within 15 minutes of flight end, with 99% success over 10 flights, observed in Grafana, dashboard ABC, and an automated success log. Accountability: driver is Dana, backend, approver is Alex, systems test, consulted are Priya, data, and Min, flight ops. Informed are the broader test team. Runway: M1 by August 30th, schema and mock stream proven. M2 by September 7th, end-to-end ingest from 1 flight. M3 by September 14th, stable over 3 flights. That level of clarity defangs most of the future arguments. It turns, why did you do it that way, into, given the levers we fixed, this was the best path. Clarity doesn't kill creativity. People sometimes worry that if we define everything up front, we suffocate innovation. I see it differently. Constraints and clear goals are the best soil for creativity. If you tell a team, make it amazing, you get 10 private definitions of amazing and quiet frustration when they collide. If you say, make it handle 10,000 requests per second at P 99 less than 150 milliseconds, with at most 2 external dependencies, and do it by October 1st with 1.5 engineers, now you've forced the kind of interesting creativity that ships. Clarity narrows the target and frees the methods. It doesn't demand the how, it respects the craft. We also need to talk about anti-patterns, habits that masquerade as leadership but quietly destroy clarity. The first anti-pattern is the drive-by assignment. A leader drops a big, ambiguous task in a hallway or chat and disappears. The recipient feels honored and anxious. They start building without a true contract. Weeks later, the leader returns with a different picture in their head, and the team has to rework. The antidote is a written one pager within 24 hours. No task above a day's work should exist only in conversation. Another anti pattern is the OKR soup, where a team is asked to hit 7 key results at once. That is not clarity, that is disguised indecision. Choose. If everything is priority one, nothing is. The third anti pattern is meeting theater. We gather to align but speak in abstractions. The test for meeting clarity is simple. Can everyone in the room write the same 3 bullet points about the decision we made? If not, the meeting was noise. I like to end key meetings by asking 3 questions out loud. What did we just decide? Who is the driver? What will we see by when? If people can't answer in the same language, we didn't finish. The fourth anti pattern is the endless pilot, the work that never becomes product because the finish line is squishy. Pilots need kill criteria and graduation criteria. If X is not true by Y date, we stop. If A and B are true by Y date, we graduate to production. Otherwise, pilots become a safe place to hide from hard choices. Clarity is not just internal. Cross functional clarity, especially with safety, compliance, or customers, is where many technical teams struggle. In regulated domains, teams sometimes treat compliance as a late stage tax. Build it, then ask the safety folks to bless it. That is a clarity failure. The right question is, what are the earliest observable artifacts that will prove we are on a safe and compliant path? It might be interface control documents reviewed by the right authorities. It might be hazard analyses with credible mitigations. It might be traceability between requirements and test. Whatever it is, bring those partners into the clear one pager as consulted or approver and agree on the early evidence. The point isn't more paperwork, it's fewer surprises. Let's hit a sensitive truth. Clarity is a kindness. Vague goals feel friendly because they seem to offer room. In reality, they are a trap. They force talented people to read your mind, and when they guess wrong, it feels like a moral failure. Clarity sets people free to excel. When I finally learned to say, here's the problem we're solving, here's what done looks like, here's who owns it, here's the first milestone, I watched stress drop even as the pace increased. People would tell me, I finally know what great looks like. There's a dignity in being asked to hit a specific target. It allows pride to attach to outcomes, not to effort alone. Some leaders worry that writing things down slows everything down. It can if you turn it into a ritual for its own sake. The goal is not documentation, it's shared state. A single page is faster than 1,000 Slack messages, and write with verbs. We will reduce test aborts by 60% by September 30th. Beats, we will improve test reliability. Verbs and numbers cut through fog. If you don't know the number yet, start with a hypothesis and promise to update it by a date. We will define the target abort rate by next Friday based on last month's data. Even that is clarity. Let's talk about escalation. In clear teams, escalation is not a crime, it's a contribution. If the driver cannot meet the end state because a lever is stuck, scope, spec, schedule, staffing, they escalate early with a choice. Given our runway, we can either reduce scope X by 30% to hit the date, or we can hold the scope and move the date by 2 weeks. Here are the consequences of both. This is what I call choiceful escalation. It is so much better than we're behind. Choiceful escalation preserves agency. It invites leadership into an explicit trade, not a rescue fantasy. As a leader, my job is to reward that behavior. If people get punished for honest escalations, you will never hear the truth again until the day the build fails. How do you maintain clarity over time? You inspect it. A weekly check-in can do this without becoming a brittle ceremony. I like a simple 3-part update from the driver. What moved? What's blocked? What decision or help is needed? I ask for one number that indicates health and one risk that is rising or falling. If the number is green and the risk is falling, we stay out of the way. If the number is red and the risk is rising, we get curious together. Is the problem misscoped? Is the finish line wrong? Are the levers actually fixed? Or can we adjust them? Do we need a deeper review? The purpose of the check in is not status for the boss, it's a safety rail to keep the work on the promised path. Let me share a story about clarity changing an outcome. We were preparing a major test sequence with a hard external date. Everyone felt the urgency. People were staying late, but we were stuck in thrash. Last minute design tweaks, rework on harnesses, test scripts changing daily. If you walked around, you saw activity everywhere. If you looked at the line of actual readiness, we were flat. The turning point wasn't a pep talk. It was a one pager written in 20 minutes with the test conductor and the systems lead. We wrote the clear brief, the problem, too many late changes. The levers, scope could be cut, the date could not move, spec for non critical telemetry could be manual. The end state, ready as 5 clean rehearsals end to end with 0 write ups. The accountability, driver for each rehearsal artifact, approver for test readiness, and the runway M1. 2 clean rehearsals by Friday. M2, integrated rehearse with ops by Tuesday. M3, readiness sign off on Thursday. That document killed 3 side quests, isolated 2 bugs that were hiding in churn, and gave everyone language to push back on last minute nice to haves. We didn't increase intensity, we increased alignment. We made the same people suddenly faster. Now, a counterpoint. You can over clarify. If every step is pre specified, you turn builders into button pushers. The art is to clarify the ends and the constraints, not the craft. Say exactly what outcomes must be true and what cliffs we cannot fall off, then let the team shape how, and hold yourself to the same standard. Leaders who love clarity can accidentally become micromanagers under stress. A good test is to ask yourself, am I writing the what and why, or am I sneaking into the how? If you are in the how, make it explicit advice, not a command, and invite debate. Another common friction point is cross time zone teams. Clarity matters more when you can't rely on hallway repair. In distributed teams, I invest in structured written briefs and ruthless meeting hygiene. Every planning meeting produces a short summary in writing. Every major thread has a single owner named at the top. Every decision gets logged in a lightweight decision log with date, owner, and why. That last piece matters because memory decays. 6 weeks later, when someone asks, why did we choose option B? You have an answer besides, I think because. Decision logs aren't bureaucracy, they are time machines. Let's zoom into the individual level for a moment. Clarity helps people grow. I try to define what great looks like for the role and for the person in a 90-day window, not an exhaustive list, 3 outcomes max. Own the telemetry pipeline to V1 end state with the defined SLA. Lead 2 design reviews and incorporate feedback. Mentor 1 junior engineer to ship a small service end to end. Pair that with explicit support. You'll have 1 backend partner for 2 weeks. Product will provide the initial schema. I'll do weekly design reviews with you for the first month. Growth is not a pep talk, it's a set of conditions and a contract. What about when clarity reveals truths we don't like? Sometimes the finish line and the runway make a conflict obvious. We cannot do A and B with 2 people by next Friday. The temptation is to keep both on the board and hope. Don't. Hope is not a plan, it's a tax on morale. Choose and embrace the trade. Say it out loud. We are deprioritizing B for 2 weeks. Here's why. Here's what we will not be doing on B so we can finish A. This is leadership as subtraction. Subtraction often feels like loss in the moment. In reality, it is the only way to generate a win you can see. I want to address a subtle cultural issue. Clarity and kindness are often confused with softness. They are not. Clear goals and honest check ins are demanding because they expose slips early and require decisions. They leave less room to hide. But that demand is paired with dignity. You are asking people to be adults with one another. The alternative is a quiet cynicism that grows when people work hard on ambiguous goals and then are told at the end that they missed. I would rather have 5 minutes of discomfort today than 3 weeks of wasted work. Here's a tiny tool I use for myself, the 10 lines rule. If I can't explain the project in 10 lines that name the problem, the owner, the end state, the first milestone, and the constraint, I am not allowed to assign it yet. I either need to sharpen it or explicitly ask someone to help me sharpen it as a small task. This protects me from outsourcing my thinking under the banner of empowerment. Empowerment is giving context and autonomy, not handing someone a fog bank. Let's talk numbers. Metrics can distort clarity if you pick vanity indicators. Choose the smallest measure that proves the outcome you actually care about. If the goal is reduce ground aborts, the metric is number of aborts per week or mean time between aborts, not lines of test code written. If the goal is faster customer support, the metric is time to first human response or time to resolution, not number of tickets closed. Then show those numbers where work happens on a dashboard people actually see, not in a monthly slide no one reads. Visibility builds self correction. It also builds trust because everyone is looking at the same scoreboard. We should also be honest that clarity has an emotional component. Ambiguity produces anxiety. Anxiety produces control seeking behavior. Leaders micromanage when they feel unsafe. Teams go quiet when they fear that surfacing confusion will be used against them. The cure is not only better documents, it's better relationships. When someone says, I don't know, thank them. When someone escalates early, say, good catch. When you change your mind, narrate why. We learned X, given that, we're choosing Y. These small moves reinforce that clarity is a shared value, not a test you give people. If you're listening and thinking, this sounds great, but my world is chaos, let me suggest a place to start. Take one active project that feels sticky. Write a one-page clear brief. Share it with the team. The first version will be imperfect. That's the point. You'll discover who thought they were the owner and who actually is. You'll realize the end state was a slogan. You'll learn which levers are truly fixed. The conversation that brief provokes will save you more time than it costs. Do it again next week for another project. In a month, your team will have a rhythm and a library of living briefs that smooth handoffs in memory. As we wrap, let me connect clarity back to trust. Trust grows when promises are made carefully and kept consistently. Clarity is how you make careful promises. It is how you avoid overcommitting. It is how you pick your battles and then show people where to aim. Intensity is still valuable. It's how we surge when the moment demands it. But intensity without clarity is a sugar high. Clarity without intensity is a syllabus with no class. The leaders I admire most pair them well. They say exactly what matters. They choose a visible finish line. They name owners and constraints, and then they bring a calm, focused urgency to the work. In the next episode, we'll talk about urgency as a tool, not a mood, when to push, when to cool, and how to recover without losing momentum. For now, I'd love to hear how clarity shows up in your world. What's one place where a one-page brief might cut through noise? What's a finish line you can redefine this week in measurable terms? If this episode helped, subscribe, share it with someone who's carrying a lot right now, and send me your questions. Over the first 5 episodes, I'll keep sharing frameworks and stories from the trenches, and after that, we'll start bringing in engineering leaders from across the tech world, people who've shipped hard things, learned hard lessons, and have their own ways of making clarity real. Thanks for listening to Built to Trust. Here's to work that's worth doing, done with precision, teams that move quickly because they know exactly where they're going, and leadership that trades noise for signal, hurry for alignment, and anxiety for agency. I'll see you in episode 3.